The President.
To the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we congratulate you on the beginning of your presidency of the Council this month in September, and we trust that the working methods won't let you down, and that you won't let the working methods down. We are grateful to Permanent Representative Hoxha for his statement, his leadership of the Security Council Informing Group on documentation and other procedural questions, and for organizing today's event. For many years now, the Security Council has been discussing its working methods in an open format with the participation of a broad range of UN member states. We consider this a useful practice because a periodic review of our existing toolkit makes it possible to identify reserves for its further enhancement. We are convinced that today's discussion, just as an external assessment of the current situation itself, will make a tangible contribution to the activities of the working group and enrich it with new ideas. Of course, this is with the understanding that the working methods themselves, as well as any steps to modify them, were and remain the ownership of the members of the Council. The Russian Federation has always consistently supported and continues to support a comprehensive discussion of this topic by the Council in an open format with the participation of all interested member states. This is based on our understanding of the practical significance of this discussion, which now dates back many years, because it provides an opportunity to increase coordination between the Council and a wide range of member states. We welcome the results achieved over past years. Many of the ideas voiced in the Council chamber later became part of Presidential Note 507, which is of particular importance as a compendium of Security Council working practices and is actively used by non-permanent members as an important primary source. At the same time, given the sensitive nature of the issue of UN Security Council working methods, we believe that any reforms must be aimed at a genuine increase in the effectiveness and efficiency of the Council's implementation of its primary functions of maintaining international peace and security. The use of populist rhetoric in this context, including as part of talking endlessly about increasing the level of transparency in the work of the Council, not only fails to contribute to achieving results, but on the contrary, often harms the cause. We note the efforts of the delegation of Albania to enhance the working methods of the Council. We note the new practice of preparing an annual report of the aforementioned informal working group. We welcome the Council's adoption of presidential notes prepared by Albania aimed at increasing the efficiency of the work of the Council, including its subsidiary bodies. We see active interest in the procedural aspects of the Security Council's activities on the part of non-permanent members. This certainly works in favor of the collective development of the Council's best practices. Mr. President, unfortunately, the Council has recently been increasingly confronted with substantive problems in its activities. We have consistently stressed that cosmetic touch-ups are not enough here. A serious, comprehensive discussion is needed. The practice of individual Council members using the Council to further their narrow national interests has taken on threatening proportions. Thanks to their deliberate pressure, the agenda of the Council is growing ever longer with domestic political issues, human rights issues, climate, and other matters. This is, of course, done under the best and most plausible pretexts. At the same time, they deliberately ignore the fact that, pursuant to the UN Charter, the Security Council should not be dealing with these matters at all, not to mention the fact that it cannot help to resolve these problems. Such actions once again show that the real goal is to put pressure on objectionable countries. Often, the real reasons that led to the eruption of a particular conflict are deliberately hushed up and glossed over. As a result of this, some UN missions, including peacekeeping operations, receive vague mandates with inappropriate functions that they objectively cannot perform. This only leads to increased distrust in their impartiality and effectiveness. One example is the situation with the mandate of the UN assistance mission in Iraq. We also see attempts to shift blame and responsibility for emerging crises elsewhere, as was the case when the Council considered the Afghan issue, and certain members of the Council persistently tried to narrow down its comprehensive discussion to the issue of protecting human rights. We have always consistently believed that it is unacceptable to ignore the views of a country hosting a UN peacekeeping contingent on its territory. Thus, the authorities of Lebanon have repeatedly sent the members of the Council an unambiguous signal about the need to strengthen coordination between the interim force and the Republic's government and army, including to ensure the protection and security of UN personnel along the Blue Line. However, the pen holders of the Lebanese dossier chose to simply ignore the views of the Lebanese people. We note Western colleagues' tactic of changing the focus of a discussion if the issue raised is not in line with their narrow national interests. A clear example of this is discussion of revising or lifting sanctions against countries where restrictive measures are no longer appropriate for the current situation. It is no secret to anyone that sanctions regimes are used by some states as levers of political pressure, and what's more, under an international and UN umbrella. This approach can hardly be called constructive, including when it comes to ensuring the effectiveness of sanctions regimes. Despite the fact that the reasons for which sanctions were introduced are no longer relevant, there are new and ever more reasons every time to keep them in force. At the same time, we also note that the pen holders of sanctions files are often guided by the nature of their own relationship with this or that country on the Council's agenda. The Council once again witnessed persistent attempts to extend restrictions against the Central African Republic and Mali solely in order to maintain external pressure on them. The sovereign view of these countries on the Council's agenda, countries which have achieved significant success in stabilizing the situation on their territory, have been demonstratively ignored in this, just as their legitimate concerns are persistently ignored. And our actions were respectful when it came to Mali. We note with regret the Council's gradual loss of capacity for constructive discussion and negotiation. Instead of looking for solutions to complex problems, which truly does require both time and a willingness to compromise, Western states often deliberately choose the simplest path forward, which provokes the use of the veto or abstention on documents. And again, a fresh example of this is the situation with Mali sanctions, when our repeated and persistent calls to the pen holders to take a constructive approach and turn on their brains were simply ignored. And please don't tell us about the painstaking efforts that you made to negotiate the Mali resolution. Those efforts consisted of fully ignoring the concerns of that country. I'll let you in on a little secret. One of the permanent members of the Council said in closed consultations that we are the Security Council and we do what we want, not what the country wants. Is this not a blatant example of a neo-colonial approach? I would also like to stress one more thing. The issue of the right of the veto does not fall under working methods. It is rather the cornerstone of the entire Security Council architecture and the gauge to achieving balanced decisions in the Council. Yet this, however, does not obviate the need for working methods and approaches that would contribute to the achievement of compromises. There needs to be a will to negotiate, to demonstrate wisdom and pragmatism, as well as to listen and to heed other colleagues in the Council. Yet, other Western colleagues in the Council are quick to criticize the use of the veto, while they modestly fail to mention the fact that they don't even require this veto, because what they have in their pocket is really 8 votes, and they use those votes, which is essentially a hidden veto, without having to resort to the real veto. That is why the Security Council does not need an expansion through the addition of other like-minded Western members. A preferred tactic of our Western colleagues has become the use of accusations in absentia, pitting labels, sabotage, diktat, manipulation. On some issues, such as Ukraine, the Council has long turned into a platform for voicing the most absurd fakes and propaganda from Western states. What's more, the opinion of the West is categorically put forward as the only correct one. Does such a destructive approach contribute to Council unity? Hardly. In this context, the issue of pen holdership of certain dossiers becomes more and more relevant. Only 3 delegations continue to act as pen holders on most issues. Despite their long-lost status of colonial empires, they have become convinced of their own exclusivity and believe themselves to be regional experts and patronize other states and even entire regions. The views of host countries, regional stakeholders who are often more on top of the situation on the ground, and sometimes even representatives of the Secretariat themselves, are completely ignored. Another relevant example of the abuse of penholder status is the methodology for negotiating council resolutions. Work is often carried out under artificial time pressure, which does not allow for experts to carry out a comprehensive study of documents. And in order to obtain desired results during the votes, our Western colleagues have now begun using the tactic of putting unprecedented pressure on countries that disagree on the basis of the principle, whoever is not with us is against us. And what do we have in the end, dear colleague? More and more half-baked documents that do not account for the key concerns of council members, give unclear instructions to the Secretariat, and are often unrealistic in their goals and objectives. This approach is not conducive to effective conflict resolution, and what's worse, it undermines the authority of the UN Security Council. We have consistently advocated expanding the circle of penholders primarily through non-permanent members. At the same time, we are guided by the provision in Presidential Note 507 that any member of the Council can be a penholder and more than one member can be a co-penholder. We attach particular importance here to the views of African states. We are convinced that reviewing the issue of penholdership will contribute to increasing the efficiency of the work of the Council. In this regard, we welcome the launch, with our active participation, of an ongoing discussion of this issue in the Council's informal group on working methods. We will continue to engage constructively with interested colleagues to negotiate a draft note on penholdership. We have consistently drawn attention to the Council's excessive documentation workload. The Council produces several hundred documents annually, and the added value of some of them is unfortunately doubtful. Other imbalances include a regularly noted excessive passion for micromanaging resolutions. We have always consistently stated that the final products of the Council should be clear, concise, easy to understand, and most importantly, action-oriented. The question of the optimal ratio of open to closed sessions of the Council remains relevant. Russia continues to advocate for maintaining a balance between the two, but we see that some members of the Council, while loudly clamoring about maximum transparency when discussing some country issues, in fact, use them exclusively for propaganda shows and prefer to keep the consideration of sensitive or inconvenient topics behind closed doors. In conclusion, I cannot fail to note the already sore point of inviting briefers to meetings of the Council to speak on various topics. Persistent attempts by Western colleagues to censor the participation of briefers who, in their opinion, do not meet certain Western criteria, but who are in reality simply not prepared to sing to their tune and have an alternative view of various international problems, simply do not stand up to scrutiny. Unfortunately, we have also seen cases of insults to speakers who express a non-Western position and even personal attacks. Such actions are unacceptable and do not contribute to an objective and balanced discussion. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement.